So let's talk about some basic design guidelines. Your text goes through a bunch of them, but first off, I hope we're clear that the menu decides our equipment, right? We got to figure out what we want to serve before we can start designing the place. Second, be clear about how much we want to spend. You know, very often large equipment dealers like Trimark Economy have design services on staff, and very often those design services are there to sell you extra equipment. If you're working with professionals, trust the ones who are sticking to your budget, not the ones who try to talk you into maybe just something just a little bit extra. Um, Try to commit to the most energy efficient equipment in your price range. Consider future growth that might need extra space or additional power requirements or utilities. Don't run out of electric room on your panel. Um, Consider things that are movable so that your flow can be flexible. If you maybe don't get the design right the first go round, you might be able to shift some things around. Separate the stages of food production so raw materials can be prepared well in advance. Obviously, you're looking for equipment that has, reliable reputation, proven track record, that kind of thing. And then you're going to control costs in places where it doesn't affect the staff and the kitchen, the customers don't notice. Kitchen crew won't be affected. So, there are ways to economize in, sort of hidden corners. Um, but we do certainly need to keep staff comfort and safety in mind. So, number one, make sure there's sufficient space to perform all the required tasks. So, if you're baking bread, right, you have more space requirements than if you're a waiter filling up glasses for service. Generally, your space requirements are going to be influenced by number of people working in a specific area, what kinds of things are going on there, and what kind of equipment is needed in that area. How much storage space you might need for immediately accessible supplies. So, in that waiter station, is there ice? Is there a scoop? Is there a place to lay the glasses out? Are the glasses there? That kind of thing. And then any clearance for moving equipment or doors that open, make sure that, say your freezer doors are on the right side of the equipment, that kind of thing. And then adequate aisle space. If you don't have enough aisle space, people have to squeeze to go past. If there's too much, they take extra steps. Generally, overall, kitchen aisles should be 36 inches wide, a little bit wider if they're going to carry two-way traffic or cart traffic. Now, obviously, we want to design this intelligently so that we avoid injury. So, we may have to twist, lift, reach, do things like that. Those movements could get repetitive. We try to minimize that as much as possible. We're looking to keep the temperature and the humidity consistent. Above all, we really want adequate lighting for the required tasks. Now, CURFL, which is the California Uniform Retail Food Facilities Law, outlines foot candle requirements for lighting. But basically, I mean, you need to be able to see what you're doing and see what needs to be cleaned up. Essentially, you're thinking about your kitchen as a manufacturing facility. Raw product comes in the back door, finished product goes out to the customer. You want to think about your flow patterns, both in the kitchen and out to the guests, so flow of service. Busy night, the whole system is like a freeway, basically. There's always possibility of disaster if people are colliding. In general, to speed service, the flow lines should be as short as possible and not intersect. Take a look at fast food places. So the flow is always short and straight. Next time you're at one, notice how few steps the workers take to like fill your drink or ring you up or pick up a burger or something like that. Opposite's kind of true in a fine dining operation. A lot of the stuff is done in the kitchen, out of sight. But you still want the flow to be as efficient as you possibly can, right? So your text outlines a few different flow charts to, to take a look at. Another thing would be to do a Google search about bubble diagrams, and you can get a better idea maybe of spatial relations there. So that's bubble diagrams. In terms of your budget, a good rule of thumb would be to think about your kitchen equipment costing no more than 1/3 of everything that you spend in equipping the restaurant. That's, including tables, chairs, lighting, painting, all of your decor, those kinds of things. When we're talking about planning our front of the house, one good place to start is to confirm with the local fire department the correct maximum occupancy for your space, and then take it from there. So then consider the maximum number of seats allowed in the space, as well as the average time you want customers to spend at a table. So generally, faster the turnover, the greater need for those kind of clear flow patterns that don't intersect. If your dining is meant to be leisurely, then your flow should be designed so that the waiters are kind of as unobtrusive as possible. So, how close is too close when you're talking about table positions? Good general guideline is about 15 square feet per seat. So, if you have then 10 seats in your restaurant, you need 150 square feet of dining space, right? That includes waiters, the aisles, waiter service stations, but doesn't include entryways and restrooms. So could change with the shape and the size of the room. And also the kind of place you have. The more upscale, the more square foot you might need. You might need up to 18, right? A moderately priced restaurant maybe gets away with 12 per square feet. If you're doing a banquet hall, maybe a minimum of 10 square feet. Generally, the lowest requirement would be something like a school cafeteria with 8 to 10 square feet per seat. Other factor you have to take into account is your turnover, or what we in the business call turns, which is the number of times that a seat gets occupied during a specific meal period. So, you also want to think about the fact that even though your dining room might be quote unquote full, all the seats might not be. You might have a deuce or a party of two at a table that could hold 4. So partial vacancy rate could be as high as 20% in table service restaurants. So you've got to consider that when you're talking about that. But you want to figure out how long you're expecting people to sit in those tables. Well, they're not sitting in tables; they're sitting in chairs. Talk about selecting chairs. If you can't get samples, which obviously you should, some kind of rules of thumb: 15-degree angle for the chair back is recommended. Depth of seat from the edge to the chair back should be about 16 inches. The overall height of the chair from floor to the chair back shouldn't be any more than 34 inches. Otherwise, it's hard to serve over the top of that. Standard distance from floor to seat is 18 inches. Distance between the seat and the tabletop should be about 12 inches. You want about 2 feet or so inches of space for each chair at a table, maybe up to like 28 inches if you have armchairs. And then for bar or countertop seating, you want maybe 24, 26 inches per stool. And you're considering your chairs in conjunction with the tables. Do they push under all the way? Are they easy to move? Are they stackable? Do you want them to be stackable? Right? Thinking about your overall dining experience is going to help you with both chair and table selection. Tables, obviously, you're looking for sturdy construction, relatively attractive bases, self-leveling bases, or the ability to adjust for when the tables get wobbly is really going to be crucial, right? So you want to think about the stability of your table. Planning for service. terms of wait stations or waiters' work areas, generally you should provide a small wait station. So I'm talking, up to maybe 3 feet for every 20 to 30 seats, or a big one could be as large as 8 to 10 feet with 24 to 30 inches wide for every maybe 50 to 75 seats. The need for a large wait station is going to depend really on how far away it is from the kitchen and the food pickup area. Like the further away, the bigger a wait station you're going to need to be. And generally, there's not a lot of eye appeal in the wait station. So, you're looking for, well, in higher end places, they may have things that are sort of attractive pieces of furniture on their own that they've adapted to hold silverware and napkins and water pitchers and that kind of thing. If we're thinking about design, we have to consider our design mistakes, and probably the number one mistake would be an inconsistent ambiance. And we've talked about that when we're talking about the 4 Ps of marketing. But, when an element isn't right, if the staff uniforms are inconsistent with the theme of the restaurant, or the paint doesn't fit the overall mood. Secondly would be if too many people are involved in the design process. Certainly you want to get as much input as you can, rely on professionals, but really one person needs to be making that final decision. However, we also have to consider our target market, and when we're designing a place, design it for that market, not for ourselves. The places that I've been involved with, might not be my particular dream, but they're what works in a particular location. We've already talked about inadequate space between tables. You want at least maybe 3.5 feet in between tables, up to 4 feet for a fine dining restaurant. Don't overlook your traffic patterns. Don't have an unrealistic budget, right? So, casual eatery anywhere from maybe $50 to $60 per square foot. Fine dining maybe up to $400 a square foot. And so, if you don't have a realistic budget, your project may be doomed. Make sure that you're not getting cutbacks in non-revenue producing space. So in other words, don't put in more seats just because you can at the expense of sufficient room in the kitchen. Right, we want to make sure that we maximize what produces revenue, right? But seats where customers can sit, but we've got have to have enough production and storage facility to adequately serve those seats. Lighting, poor lighting is a huge reason why guests don't come back. Either they can't see, or it's too bright, or it doesn't fit their mood. Along with offensive colors, so. Generally blue seen kind of like as a cold color. Reds are generally more inviting, although bright red suggests Chinese restaurants. Yellow often is seen as kind of a neutral, although a bright yellow might be like fast food. There's all sorts of color theory. And then lastly, forgetting about the future. Are you ever going to expand? Do you need to remodel? Are you going to have to retool your design? Okay. Definitely don't neglect the restrooms and make sure that they are always clean. Generally, people judge the entire restaurant on the cleanliness of the restroom. If this is what the restroom looks like, imagine what the kitchen looks like. You know what I'm talking about. Speaking of restrooms, a trend I've noticed in San Francisco, in particular at a place called Nopa, has been having the restrooms be basically toilets arranged sort of around a central hand washing area. And at Nopa, it's great if you ever go and check it out. Their restrooms, they've got maybe eight toilets on each side of this central stink, so every person coming out of the restroom is in full view of all the other diners. And I have seen more hand washing going on at that restaurant than I ever see in a typical men's bathroom. What else? Sizing, space requirements. So we've talked about space in the dining room. Our kitchen we want to think of as, roughly half the size of the dining room. Could be a little smaller depending on the kind of operation. We've already talked about kind of the sizing by seat count. For the back of the house, for like a banquet space, maybe you're talking 3 to 5 square feet per space. Per seat. Kind of a casual dining sort of place, maybe 5 to 9 square feet, and then for a deluxe dinner house, maybe 7 to 10 square feet per seat. Out of that, the food prep area is about 50% of the back of the house. Storage is going to be roughly around 20%. Dishwashing somewhere around 15%, and then wait staff circulation is going to be about 15%. Thinking about your dishwashing space, about 60% of the space in the dish room is for counter space for soiled dishes, and then clean dishes are going to take up the other remaining 40%. When we're thinking about the dish area itself, unless you're talking about disposable or recyclable, where every person is going to generate around 6 to 8 dirty dishes. So think about how many full dish racks your machine can process in an hour. And then, generally speaking, even the most efficient of dish rooms are only going to be operating at about 70% efficiency. Basically, you're talking about racks that aren't run as full, or that you're not running the machine constantly, right? What else do we want to think about in terms of the dish machine? Typical space dimensions, we're talking about a single tank, like what we have in our lab classrooms, dishes per hour, maybe 1,500, and the space required about 250 square feet. I'm not even going to get into conveyor dish machines and things like that are in huge facilities. But probably final thing about thinking about your waste or your dish machine is how you're handling the waste, both food and other types. Are you composting? Where are you going to have the waste containers? All of that kind of stuff. What else? Receiving. Space requirements for receiving really depends on how many meals you're serving a day. So, if you're serving 200 meals or so a day, you want square footage of maybe 50 to 60 square feet. You're doing like 300 to 500 meals a day, you need maybe 60 to 90 square feet for receiving. These are for restaurants. For hospitals, for healthcare, different story. Or for schools, right? For schools and hospitals, a little bit different. Should I talk about that? Sure, why not? So, healthcare, if you're going like up to 50 beds, you need maybe 50 square feet of storage space. 50 to 100 beds, somewhere around 50 to 80 square feet. 100 to 200, maybe 80 to 130 square feet. If we're talking schools, meals a day, 2 to 300. 30 to 40 feet of storage space, 3 to 500 per day, 40 to 60 square feet, and 500 to 700, 60 to 75 square feet. One of the things I always think about on the when we go to places like Las Vegas, which, the huge hotels and restaurants, is I would really just love to see the storage areas and where do they keep all of this stuff. Think about just the room service tables for a large hotel. Where the heck do they keep all of those things? You've got to have an entire probably underground city below Las Vegas just to serve all those things. Also on your, so that's your receiving requirements. For dry storage, your space requirements for restaurants, you're talking about 100 to 200 meals a day. You need about 120 to 200 square feet of space. For anywhere up to 350 meals a day, somewhere between 2 to 250 square feet of storage. Up to 500 meals a day, you're talking about, up to maybe from 250 to 400 square feet of dry storage. What else are we thinking about in terms of storage requirements? What about refrigerated storage, you ask? Well, Guideline for refrigeration space is going to be average restaurant for open for 3 meals a day is 1 to 1.5 cubic feet of refrigerated space per meal served. For fine dining, that's more like 2 to 5 cubic feet. And so, you think about a restaurant of 140 seats serving 3 meals a day. That was going to need between 420 to 630 cubic feet of refrigeration. But keep in mind that we're talking about usable storage space. So when we're calculating cubic inches or cubic feet of our refrigerators, coolers, and freezers, make sure that we're talking about the actual interior space, not the space taken up by motor or the insulation or the evaporator or things like that. Hopefully that gives you some idea of space requirements for your places and what we're talking about in terms of our planning process, both for equipment, for front of the house space allocation, for back of the house space allocation. Hopefully between this and your text, you've got a good idea of what requirements are going to be for your upcoming projects.